Hi and welcome. My name is Julianne Cost, and in the next few minutes we're going to take a look at how we can organize our images using the folder panel in Lightroom. So the thing to know is when you're working with Lightroom, you want to make sure that you move your files and create folders and everything in Lightroom. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. So let's go ahead and start by looking at the folder panel. You can see here I'm in the library module, and I can click on either the Australia or the Singapore folder in order to see the contents in those folders. So let's look at the Australia folder for a minute, and I'm going to scoot down, and you'll notice down here I actually have a number of images that were photographed with an intervalometer. So it's a time-lapse sequence, and I would like to select all of these files and actually put them into another folder. Now we can either select the images now and then automatically have them be placed into the folder, or you can simply create the folder and then move the files later. We'll go ahead and do this both ways, but I'm going to start by just moving down and selecting all of the images first. So here's the end of it right here. So I selected the first image, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click here to select all of the images in that sequence. Then in the folder panel, I'll click on the plus icon, and I have a choice of either adding a subfolder or adding a folder anywhere I want, either on this internal drive or on an external drive. For now, we'll go ahead and add a subfolder, and I will title this Time Lapse. And then you can see right here, this is why I've already selected the images, because I now have the option to include those selected folders. Now when I click Create, Lightroom's actually going to move the files into that subfolder, and we can see the subfolder right here. Here is that time-lapse folder. Now, if I were to right mouse click on the time-lapse folder or control click on the Mac, I can actually reveal this in the Finder, or on Windows it would say Show in Explorer. And you can see here that sure enough, on my hard drive in my operating system, I now have a subfolder called Time-Lapse in the Australia folder, and Lightroom has actually moved those files on disk. So that's a really important concept to understand, is when you're in Lightroom and you make subfolders and you move your images, we're actually moving those files on the hard drive. All right, let's go ahead and make another folder. I'll return back to the plus icon, and instead of adding a subfolder, I'm simply going to add a folder. I'll go to my desktop, and then inside my photographs folder, I actually want to add a folder called 2012 so that I can put the Australia and the Singapore images into them. So I'll click New Folder and 2012, click Create, and then select Choose. And we can see now that sure enough, there's my 2012 folder. And if I want to move my folders, I can simply drag Australia into 2012 and Singapore, and now they're actually in that folder. Again, if I right mouse click and I say Show in Finder, we can see inside my Photographs folder, I now have a folder called 2012, and those files are inside of it. So you can see it's really quite easy to move your images and create whatever folder structure you want directly from within Lightroom. All right, now if I want to see more of my folder structure, for example, I actually want to see what is the parent folder of 2012, again, I can right mouse click, or on the Mac, control click, and then I can say Show Parent Folder. As soon as I select that, we can now see that Lightroom has added the Photographs folder. Right? And if I switch back over to the Finder, sure enough, the parent folder of the 2012 is Photographs. So you can really reveal or hide as much of your folder structure as you want. If I decided that I didn't want to see that Photographs folder, again, I'll right mouse click or control click on Mac, and I could say hide the parent folder, in which case Lightroom would only show me the 2012 folder. Now I want to point out something that's a little unique to Lightroom, and that is the ability to either see all of the contents of subfolders at one time, or just see the images on a per folder basis. Let me explain. If we click on the Australia folder, you'll notice that I can certainly see all those images that I took on Australia, but I can also see all of the time-lapse images. So that might be a little bit different from your operating system. Usually in the operating system, you would see all of the loose photographs that were in the Australia folder, but then you would see the subfolder, right? And I can show it right here, the time-lapse folder. By default, Lightroom lets you look at all of the images, not only in the folder that you have selected, but in all of those subfolders. That's why we're seeing the contents of the time-lapse folder when I've got the Australia folder selected. If I want to change this behavior, I can click on the plus icon here and turn off the ability to show photos in subfolders. Now when I do this, you'll notice that my total photo count went down for my Australia folder because it's going to only show me the images that are loose in that folder, and I can no longer see all of those time-lapse images. If I wanted to see those, I would need to actually go and click on the time-lapse folder. Now, one thing that you might notice, and the reason that we have it on by default, is if I were to close the triangle right here next to 2012, it actually looks like there aren't any images in that folder. That just means that there aren't any images loose in that folder, right? Because the subfolders are not shown. The minute I go back in and I enable show photos in subfolders, now of course we can see that there's 273 images that are in this 2012 folder. Of course, they're distributed between Australia and time-lapse in Singapore, but as long as I've got this enabled, we can see all of the photos in all of the subfolders when I click 2012. So it's just a little different from your operating system, so I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. All right, I also just want to take a moment to point out what's going to happen if you do move your images in the operating system and not in Lightroom. So let's go over to the Finder here, and let's say, for example, that we go into the Australia folder, and I'm going to take one of those images, and I'm simply going to move it outside of the Australia folder. Now, when I return back to Lightroom, and we click on the Australia folder, you can see that I have a little warning up here. And if I click on that warning, Lightroom's going to tell me that it can't locate the file because you basically moved it behind Lightroom's back. When you import files into Lightroom, you're telling Lightroom where those files live. As long as you move your files within Lightroom, no problem. But if you move them in the operating system, then Lightroom is going to need to have those files relocated. So probably the easiest thing to do here, if you're not sure where you've put the file, is just to copy this using Command-C, click Locate. So if I couldn't see the image, which of course I can see the image that I'm trying to find right here, I could use the operating system in order to search for that. One of the things you might notice if you've moved a lot of images, you want to make sure that Lightroom also finds any nearby missing photos so that you don't have to relink each one of them. Then when I click Select, we can see that that image no longer has the warning. But I do want to point out that file is no longer in the Australia folder, right? If I go back to that same option and disable the show photos in subfolders, we can see now that that file actually lives in a 2012 folder. So again, if you're going to move your files, I would suggest you simply do this in Lightroom, click anywhere in the photograph and just drag it to the folder that you want to put it in. And then to make sure that we're all viewing the same thing, I will use the plus icon right here one more time and enable the show photos in subfolders. Now, I don't want to make this seem overly complex, but I do want to show you one additional feature, and that is Lightroom's ability to create a folder on an external drive, because I know that not all of us have a ton of space on our internal drives, and so we store most of our photographs usually on external drives. So right now you can see in my folder area in Lightroom that I'm only looking at my internal drive, but I can always click the plus icon right here, add a folder, and then if I had another external drive, for example like this one connected, I could go ahead and create a new folder here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll create new folder, and for now we'll just call this Photos for Demo. I'll click Create. And then as soon as I choose that, we can see in Lightroom in the folder area that Lightroom's going to pay attention to this external drive. And sure enough, if I wanted to move some of my files, for example, if I wanted to take an image here in Singapore and move it onto this other drive, all I need to do is just drag and drop it. And it actually moves the file. So in this case, Lightroom is not making a duplicate like your operating system would. Instead, Lightroom's actually taking that file from my internal drive and moving it to this external drive. Of course, if I didn't want that or I wanted to move it back, all I need to do is select it and then drag it to the other folder. So there you go. There's a quick overview of how you would organize your images using the folder panel in Lightroom. My name is Julianne Kost. Thanks for watching.